Hi, I'm Julie Johnson of Heart Alchemy Intuitive Guidance and Healing. I'm a mental health counselor and I also do Akashic readings, energy healing, and spiritual coaching and guidance.
And I am Mystic Michelle from Mystic Wisdom Healing. I'm an intuitive mystic. I am a Reiki master. I am an intuitive tarot reader, herbalist, and teacher. So today on Reader to Reader, I'm very excited to get to ask Julie questions about their spiritual journey and where they came from. And oh my gosh, it's mind blowing. Like I am so excited for you guys to get to know this beautiful being and the journey that they went on. And I love how different it is
Thank
from my
you.
story.
Awesome.
So let's do it.
Yeah.
So welcome back to the conversation. Today we are going to be talking to Julie and interviewing Julie on their how they got started. So, Julie,
Yes, Michelle.
what got you on your spiritual path? Where did it begin?
Oh my goodness. It is funny to think about
Right?
because it's really it's the life story.
Yeah, it's the life story. Like what,
It's
how
the life story. Yeah. Well,
and how far back does it go?
yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's interesting to reflect on. Really, I think similar to you, it's like I have to go back to childhood, um, and just trace some of the evolution there. And I have a quite different story than you, so this is fun.
oh, love that.
I love
If we had the
it.
same one, it would be boring.
That would be kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
um, so I grew up in a Christian home, a very like loving and supportive Christian home. I grew up going to church, went to church camp. I loved it. It was amazing.
Really?
So I have so many friends throughout the years who have expressed a lot of damage from their church
Yeah.
experiences. And I didn't experience that. I actually had a really good upbringing. Now, as I've grown, expanded, evolved along my spiritual journey, I can recognize there are things that I accepted that I'm now releasing, if that makes sense. Like
Unlearning.
unlearning, just like anything, not even just religious programming, any type of programming we get from society or culture, religion, we hopefully start to notice as we mature and explore and figure out our own path, what serves and what doesn't serve. So that's really most of my kind of process with Christianity. And so I had a really, I think a pretty healthy kind of moderate, if that makes sense, moderate Christian upbringing. Lots of traditions and things, but
Yeah. But how refreshing.
how I
How
know.
to not be like your religion totally screwed me up. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
because not all religion is that.
No, it's not. And it can be so edifying and it can be so good. And I think we can almost turn anything into a religion and turn anything into something that limits us if we don't allow there to be uncertainty, change, possibility in how we view the world. Sort of like if we just decide this is the only way I'm going to think about something forever and ever and ever, that's okay, but it shuts us down to all the possibilities in the world.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I think too it's really about the intention of the religion and like what
Yeah, and how we're taught it.
and how we're taught it and why we're taught it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what is the intention behind
Yes.
what information is being given to us.
So, on that note, I feel like I was raised in a family that really My extended family is all Christian, or has Christian upbringing and roots. Um, Different flavors of that, but how I think the kind of family culture that I was raised in was Christianity is a tool for connecting with God, connecting with love. It's supportive in healing and growth. I didn't get a lot of fire and brimstone in my upbringing, but I was aware of the concept of hell. And I still remember, just to give you an idea of kind of like the flavor of my parents. My parents are great. My parents are wonderful. Um, and my mom and my brother were sharing this story when my brother was younger. He asked my mom something like, "Wait, if you can only go to heaven if you believe in Jesus, what happened to the Native Americans? They didn't know who Jesus was, but they were spiritual." And mom said she like thought about that, and she was like, God knows what's in everyone's heart. She said I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something to the effect of that. Plus, like we don't know the workings of God and how God connects with different people and that process. And I just really respect that. She's a daughter of a pastor herself. She was raised in a Lutheran Christian upbringing. Um, and so I've just always appreciated the open mindedness and open heartedness of my parents. I feel like Christianity in my experience was always used to include and not exclude. Now I've seen that be very different in other situations. And for me, when Christianity is used to exclude people from the love of God, it's gone off track. That's my personal opinion.
I would agree
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. So,
can I just pause for a moment and just
absolutely.
say, oh my God, your mom.
My mom.
That is the coolest, like, what a like, what a way to respond to a child in a way that is so open, knowing that, recognizing that she didn't really know what the answer was, but like giving one that wasn't excluding or saying that they were the devil.
Yes.
Like, that is just,
Yeah.
I love your mom now too.
She's very lovable. Both my parents are. I'll have some other nuggets about my dad too. But
Yes.
I'm just like, oh, what healthy attitudes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll share more about them in a bit. But just thinking about that availability to openness, I think really helped me. I had those questions too as a kid. Like, when the logic of the religion you're taught doesn't quite fit with like what I was experiencing or what I was seeing, or um, just interacting with people of different faiths or no faith, or different cultures. Um, Lots of questions arose, and I still remember, again, another excellent my you're going to hear a lot of excellent parenting moves, I think, from my parents. They're the first to say that they're imperfect. Of course they are. They're humans, but they're a huge part of my support system throughout my life, and they've been really there for me. But I remember, and my mom told me this later, but one of my best friends growing up was Jewish, and so I was invited to all sorts of Jewish traditional holidays and celebrations and all these things with their temple. And I met their rabbi and got to ask her questions, because I remember asking her, like, what's a yarmulke for, and she was so great, and she was so patient in explaining to this Christian kid, about little aspects of the faith. And my mom told me later that she had other, parents from the church kind of asking her, like, how could you let your daughter go to a Jewish event? And my mom was just baffled, like, well, they're her friends. She was invited. What a great opportunity to learn. And Judaism and Christianity are very intertwined.
Yes.
So yeah. So my parents had no problem with me being exposed to other cultures and religious traditions. And I really appreciate that. Um, so yeah, I had like Christianity was very strong in my background, whatever. um, and I often think of it like it was kind of like a scaffolding to help me build my own kind of internal spiritual structure. And there just came a point where that scaffolding kind of was became less useful in my growth, but still can I still interact with it in different ways. Um, so I where'd you go from here? I I've done a lot of traveling in my life. I've lived a lot of places around the world, and some of this one experience was with my family. We lived in England when I was in seventh grade, and that really helped me open up my mind to the world. Like, wait a second, I can just live in the world. I can just go places. I can just be somewhere else and like live there. So, and because my parents are quite travel oriented, they've always really prioritized access to travel and education in my and my brother's life. So it's just can't even express the gratitude that I have for that because that has shaped my life significantly. Um,
How old were you when you lived in England?
I was, let's see, I was 12 to 13. So I was in seventh grade that year. It was for my dad's job. And that definitely exposed me to, we got to travel a lot during that year. You know, if you're in England, it's just so much easier to access so many different countries and things like that. So we made use of that time. I'm from Connecticut originally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, by the way,
Yeah.
I'm from Connecticut. So after that year, we did move back to Connecticut for various reasons. But I left that experience feeling really expanded and really um, just hungry for more travel experiences. And fortunately, I was exposed to other people who did travel abroad, study abroad programs in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and and my high school actually invited representatives of different high school study abroad programs to give an assembly when I was in high school. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I remember going to this assembly where they said you can go to Spain, Italy, France, or China with our program for 6 months or a year. And when they said China, I just knew I was going to China the next year. I was like, that's it, I'm doing it.
How cool!
I skipped math to stay and talk to this rep, and yeah, I came home with pamphlets. And
so you would have been about 14 at this time period?
I guess I was 15 when I made that decision.
Okay.
Yes. Came home with all the pamphlets. My parents, again, told me later, because I was amazed at how absolutely supportive they were at the time, and they said that they thought it was a phase. they're like totally, hun, great.
A year's a long
great.
time away.
Yeah, they're like, this is great. Sure. And then as I kept on being serious about it, like, oh no, I have to apply this fall if I'm gonna go for, blah blah. Like next this I have to apply this fall to get there next fall. It was a whole thing. Kind of like college. And they were like, oh, okay, if you can get financial aid, we'll keep supporting you through this if you can get scholarships and things. Okay. All right. So it all worked out. And I ended up going to China for my junior year of high school. So I was there for about 9 months.
Wow.
Now, okay, we're talking about my spiritual path. So there's so many little portals we can, just like with your story.
Yeah.
We can go on endless portals. So I'll try to keep it spiritually focused, but
that is part of the spiritual.
It's part of the spiritual.
Yeah. Experiencing other cultures is very awakening to different parts of your soul. So that is part of the spiritual journey.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's the reason that this was it was awakening to the part of myself that needed to feel that freedom to just follow whatever felt right for me. And it was such an amazing practice for me of connecting with that internal compass in a way that was quite sovereign, actually, for the time. I think, I had done so much with my family or with friends or um, so many like little expressions of independence that were maybe interwoven with family and friends, but this was like, no, this is something I'm going to do. And thank goodness my parents are kick ass and so supportive on so many levels because they had other parents telling them they were crazy. Great parents. So it was a step of, oh no, I know. It was intuition. I know this is for me and I'm going to follow it no matter what. And which has been a really important part of my journey. I think everyone's journey, learning what that internal compass is, what it feels like to have that intuitive like ping,
Yeah.
or inclination or a moment of kind of divine inspiration. So um, while I was there, I got to live with a Chinese family
Mm-hmm.
and got to experience some of their religious practices, which they weren't particularly religious, but we lived with was the parents and my host sister, and then one of the parents' mothers, so a grandma, parents, and me and another girl, and who was about my age, and she was so great. But it was the grandmother who I think I saw more kind of spiritual tradition from, especially when we traveled and visited different temples and visited different family members and just being exposed to an enormous culture, enormous and diverse culture,
And
such as
ancient.
China, ancient with multiple different spiritual perspectives and
Yeah.
religions. And just how enriching that was, how mind-blowingly expansive that was. It was very challenging for so many reasons to be, away from my family and in this, just getting used to a whole new environment. I was learning Chinese and it was great. And there were about 40 other American students in this program and it was great. We got to do so much traveling around the country. Yeah, it was amazing. And coming back to normal high school after that was wild.
I could only
It was so
imagine.
weird. Yeah, it was super weird. And I remember, especially coming back to my church after that. I still had Christian faith and wanted to reconcile some of the messaging I'd been hearing growing up.
Hurting's a good word for that.
But the messaging of a lot of Christianity is this is the only path.
Mm-hmm.
Whether even in my quite moderate Christianity, it wasn't it wasn't rammed down our throats like in some Christian traditions. But it was like Christianity specifically is the way. And I got back and I actually set up a little lunch date with my pastor. Um, Great guy. And because I was just like, I have so many questions. Like, I don't understand how to be in the world anymore. like how this makes sense. And honestly, I wish I remembered more from the conversation I had with him. I asked him a lot of questions, I think, about so there's like 1 billion people in China, or more than that, however many
It's
there
a
are.
huge population.
There's a lot of people in China, and Christianity there. Actually, this is a whole other story. Christianity there is very underground. It's not very accepted. I went to a church there, an international church, and then I had a friend who is Russian Orthodox Christian, and that is an illegal religion in China. And she went to an underground church there. It was a small family who like kind of family gathering thing. So I got to go with her to a couple of those experiences. And oh, this is bringing up so many memories actually of this one year. And so I was kind of constantly kind of interacting with different aspects of faith and religion while I was in China, attending an international church occasionally. Didn't go every week or anything like that, but um, I remember me and another friend from my study abroad group, we would go to, there was an, I think an ambassador's home who hosted a Bible study that we'd go to occasionally. International people from around the world in different perspectives. Not everyone was, super hardcore, like strict, what we might think of as fundamentalist Christian or something like that, right? There's a pretty wide range of perspectives.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like I believe in Japan, they could be multi-religious. Like they don't
Ooh.
stick to like one specific religion. Like
Right.
they, because like the gentleman, I always forget his name because I always want to think of the movie producer, but he was like Buddhist, Hindu, and Christian. Who the guy
I
who
love
brought
that.
Reiki
Oh,
to
I was
life?
wondering if it was, I don't remember
Yeah,
his name. That is so, we'll have to look that up.
I should know it, but I always think of him as Miyazaki from like the filter.
Yeah,
Not the
yeah.
same person,
Well,
but yeah.
I'm wondering
So I was
in
wondering
China if
if
that's the
China, if
case.
it's the same thing, because I don't know.
I
I'm
don't
not.
actually know. I think people probably hold different perspectives. There are philosophical beliefs, like, you know, some of the most famous ones are like Confucius, for example. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of like, beliefs around that, which are more philosophical. And there's also Taoist beliefs, there's Buddhist
Taoist.
beliefs, like all this. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think I can't answer specifically whether it's common in
yeah.
China to like hold multiple beliefs or not. I don't actually know. But that's interesting. I
I,
like
I
that
was just
thought.
I was just wondering if that was your experience while you were there, going to these international Christian.
I think that like I don't know that I was aware enough
Okay.
to be able to ask those types of questions at the time. Um, but I think that what I saw was I just remember some people, some international people that I was interacting with had a much more open view of Christianity than I was used to, meaning they probably were super chill with Buddhism
Yeah.
too, right? I don't know if they would have claimed to be Christian and Buddhist, but these also were, yeah, they weren't Chinese people per se, but
Okay.
um, yeah. So just a lot of different exposure and also going to a variety of temples and other like religious experiences, religious and spiritual cultural experiences around China. I still remember um, my friend who was Russian Orthodox feeling very, very. I remember one specific time we were at a temple, I think in southern China, where there was some sort of event going on, a spiritual kind of ceremony of some sort that we were invited to as visitors to the area. And I remember she felt so uncomfortable that she had to leave. It was so dissonant with her spiritual and faith beliefs. And she's from a more structured, um, stricter religion, which, and I respect the heck out of her. Um, it also was, even though she and I were both Christian, technically, it wasn't quite Christian enough to be saved according to Russian Orthodox. She explained it in a really gentle way. I remember her saying, well, Russian Orthodoxy just gives you the right tools. You don't have quite the right tools. And I was like, dang
That
it.
is very gentle.
She was super nice about it. And she's a wonderful, wonderful person. But just seeing that and noting how very deeply uncomfortable she was
Yeah.
with some of those um, traditional Chinese practices, spiritual practices, and how I was like, I don't really feel that. I don't really feel that this is in any way demonic,
Yeah.
and just noticing the difference in myself. And so coming back after all that, coming back to the US and talking to my pastor about it, I just remember asking, like, how could there be so many people in this world who aren't Christian because it's just not part of their culture. That just doesn't occur to them. Or like in China, where Christianity is definitely an underground religion. Um, People there, it's growing rapidly there, and all these things. But I just couldn't reconcile how um, that many people in the world just were going to hell
Yeah.
because of basically cultural differences.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, a Christian would say it's not just cultural differences, but if you're raised in one way and you have no exposure to something else. Mm, mm,
That's where the
speak.
Mormons came
Speak.
up with the baptisms for the dead, so that those
Oh,
people could have the opportunity to choose the right religion now that they knew.
which is very generous. Is one
Anyways,
perspective.
so coming back was hard.
Always look on the bright side of life. Anyway,
Love that movie.
mm-hmm.
But I could totally understand coming back and having that mind blowing, like coming back into the USA and like having to relearn the customs here.
That was weird.
When I
Yeah,
went to, I was only in Ireland for 3 weeks, and like just even just being there
that's
for
enough.
3 weeks was
Mm-hmm.
enough to change like the amount of like, oh my god, I have to go back and like participate in a land that doesn't feel right. Like it was
Yes.
overwhelming. So I couldn't imagine being somewhere for 9 months and coming back and
Yeah.
like being, what the hell?
Yeah. Reverse culture shock.
Yeah.
It's can be more impactful than culture shock. We always
Yeah.
think of going to a new place and having that culture shock, but we're prepared for it. We're going there to be culture shocked. We want to learn, we want to experience something new. When we go home, we want to experience being home. But what we get after being away, even for 3 weeks, absolutely is reverse culture shock, which we're not signing up for. That's not what we want. And so it
No.
can wallop us. It definitely walloped me. It was
Yeah.
weird. Um, and now, jumping to now, I've had so much practice going back and forth between different countries and here that it doesn't bother me much anymore. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get
I'll
there.
there.
Yeah. So yeah, I just remember not feeling very satisfied by my pastor's answer to my questions. This is coming back to the
Yes.
States. I was 17 by that time. And and he's great. He was really great. I think he was trying to be a good pastor and be responsible according to a Christian perspective while also holding space for me to be questioning. So I think he did the best that he could while also not wanting to, I don't know, the best he could. I just remember feeling pretty unsatisfied.
Well, and sometimes I will see, especially with people who have lived in a church for so long, they don't know how to answer. Like,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
want to help you out. They legitimately have never thought about the questions that you're asking,
Yeah.
so they don't really
Or they've
know how to answer the
totally, or
questions.
they've encountered it and then used their own logic or whatever they've been taught
Hmm.
to move through that, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Again, it's never done in like a passive aggressive way. It's done
yeah,
from a pure like good intent, like something for the highest good.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I've experienced at least. It's genuinely coming from a place of intending to do good
Mhm.
when in that kind of, okay, this is my Christian belief, this is how I understand the world. So everything is filtered through that lens. And I think it does, especially in my experience. I will say, in my experience, in my upbringing, it was all coming from a place of love and good intent. And you know, I'm just fortunate enough that I got to experience a lot of different cultures, religions, geographies, I guess, in so many ways that I just continued to be able to expand and grow, and just have the lived experience to bolster my own spiritual expansion. If that makes sense. So I went back to Connecticut. I ended up going for my senior year of high school. Ended up going to University of Denver for college, and um, I I fell in with a pretty neat crowd. The worst name ever, Campus Crusade for Christ. Why? Why? Why crusade? Why? I don't know. We all laughed about it. We called it crew. Okay. We all were like even my most conservative friends in that group were like, yeah, the crusade part's really crappy. That's not great. It's just like an old name for a group of college Christians. So nobody really liked that word in that phrase. But yeah, I had a lot of really close Christian friends in college, and I was really active in the Christian space, whatever that means exactly. And I even went on mission trips in like high school and college and things like that, with the intent to. A lot of times they were sort of like community service projects that we were doing, but there was also evangelistic elements. So I learned a bit about that. And yeah, that discomfort, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
it's it's interesting. So I participate in that a little bit. Never feeling like, I don't know if I was ever fully like most of the mission trips that I went on were really more community service and sharing positive Bible messages.
Right.
As opposed to fire and brimstone, Bible shoving kind of things. It like, so they felt, it felt okay. I think there was one experience I had where I was like, is this more evangelistic than I've ever done before? And yeah, it never really felt super aligned. And I think that, um, interestingly enough, that was in South Africa. I got to go on a mission trip to South Africa. That was really cool. But yeah, just trying to think how to like sum that up. I think I I I felt so connected to God and to Christ through my Christian spirituality that what felt authentic to me was certainly sharing that love. What didn't feel authentic to me was in any way ever like condemning anyone for not sharing those beliefs, because I even though I was involved in a more conservative in a lot of ways Christian circle, although there was quite a range of worldviews and beliefs within that as well when I was in college. Yeah, I never really aligned with the exclusionary Christian approach that I saw a lot of people doing. So as I continued to grow and explore, like I really, yeah, my own spirituality just kept on expanding beyond a lot of the categories and boxes that are typically associated with Christianity. And I tended to find that there were just some maybe core tenets that felt like a spiritual home to me, that everything else didn't really matter. Like there was a lot of, I remember one pastor at a non-denominational church I went to said that we minor on the minors and major on the majors, which basically little quippy things between denominations we don't care about. There's some important things that we do care about that can lead to a whole other conversation, because what's major and what's minor.
Yeah.
One denomination will say this thing that you call minor is major for us. So, but I developed my own majors, I guess. Major kind of principles of spirituality.
Well, it's kind of like it's that taproot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that thing that's an unshakable base of you.
Yeah,
That like that's where you stand. Like that's where you holding your
absolutely.
power.
And that's what kind of began to become more and more exposed the more I explored and exposed myself to different viewpoints. So, another study abroad experience I got to have was in Kenya, and that was my junior year of college. I That was 4 months, and I was in coastal Kenya, which not a lot of people know this. I didn't realize this until I was getting ready to go there, but coastal Kenya is very Muslim.
Really?
Yes, and I mean, a lot of people have heard the word Swahili.
Yes.
So Swahili is a language, it's also a culture. And it's the Swahili culture is a merging of Arabic influence with ethnic Bantu African influence merging in that area
Weaved.
of the world, weaved, woven. And so along the coast, there's a lot of Islamic culture, just kind of woven though. It's different from
Yeah.
like Islamic culture other places. So um, yeah, actually, in Kenya, I wore a headscarf a lot, um, which I didn't realize, before starting to prepare to go there. I didn't realize that that would be a thing. Um, there, I got to spend a lot of time with this wonderful Kenyan Muslim family. I got to live with them for like a month while I was there, and they taught me a lot about their different perspectives. I think my host father and I had a lot of really good conversations about some of the differences between Christianity and Islam, and I just felt so welcomed and loved by them. They're just like a great family, lots of fun kids, um, and just yeah, yeah.
Well, you know what I find really interesting, and I didn't find this out until last year or the year previous. I didn't realize that Muslims actually do follow teachings of Jesus.
Yeah,
Like, I just thought they totally, like,
they're like screw Jesus.
yeah, when people
Yeah,
talk about like their religion and their culture, they say that they like don't. And I was just like, oh,
yeah.
you do. Because I was talking to someone who
He's
was
considered a
here.
prophet.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
considered a prophet. He's just not the main one that they
Yes,
follow.
Muhammad's the main prophet.
Yeah, because I was talking to a gentleman who was Muslim, and he was celebrating his first Christmas, and I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
does that feel really weird to you,
Um,
celebrating the birth of Jesus?" And he's just like, "No," he says, "We like him," and I was like, "Wait, tell me more,"
yeah.
because this is the first time I've ever
Oh,
heard of this.
I
Like,
love that. That's such a beautiful thing to learn. Um,
yes,
because we have, I think we're kind of conditioned, perhaps, um,
weird.
to to have a. I mean, in Christianity, as Americans, whether you're Christian or not, but it really packs a lot of punch being a Christian American, um, um, and then be conditioned to feel that anyone in an Islamic nation or viewpoint culture is the enemy, right?
Yeah,
Like politically, we're conditioned,
yeah,
religiously and politically, we're kind of conditioned to think that, and yet absolutely there are people on the Islamic side who believe the same thing, right? That's
yeah.
where we get the extremists on that side,
And
which
there's extremists
there's
in
extremists
everything.
in everything, literally everything. Yeah. So of course there are extremists on all sides. The majority of people just want to hang, you know?
Yeah, I
They're
know.
like totally fine with each other. Like it's not that big of a deal. So and yeah. And that's what I experienced in coastal Kenya at that time. All the different people I was meeting, I was fascinating to them. I was just a white American Christian girl, and they
Yeah,
thought I was super interesting and cool, and I was very welcomed.
they were right, but
um, and there were lots of challenges and um, all sorts of things that I experienced in Kenya that were good personal growth experiences that I won't get into now. Um, that was another really great experience of really being immersed in a different culture, totally different religion. It was great and challenging at times, conflicting at times, and I really went through a whole process of like, how do I feel about women wearing headscarves? Well, that's not like, or like women having to wear headscarves,
Yeah.
and what that, and like, yeah, I went through a whole wave, a whole process. It was so interesting, and yeah, um, so um, and I, just to just to close out that concept, I respect anyone's cultural, traditional, religious choices. I think at the time I was just like, where is this a choice and where is this just forced? Culturally, when is this? Yeah. So I had a lot of those kinds of questions.
And every culture has those
Every
moments
culture.
of like, is this a forced conditioning that like now we're
Yeah.
okay with? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, we
And
all have our things that
yeah,
every culture. And
absolutely.
so coming into it, like you are forced to look at those questions
Yeah.
and be, it's like, am I being a rebel or am I being someone who's just trying to stand for rights?
Right. And am I being ignorant,
Or,
or
yeah,
am I being I think initially whenever I kind of enter any new culture, my gut instinct is to be accepting.
yes.
Well, I don't know what's going on. I accept your perspective. The deeper I get into it, the more I talk to different people, the more I'm going to formulate maybe some different perspectives. Um, and that's kind of what happened there.
But I think that that's a really important thing to say with everything. I don't know if you've read the Four Agreements, but
I love
there's a fifth agreement,
the word.
and it's question everything.
Even
And
yourself.
even
Yeah,
yourself. And so I like that. And I do the same thing. So, like, I want to go into a culture and, like, be immersed in the culture. And I may not understand, but I want to be as accepting because it's not that hard for me to just accept that this is how your culture
totally.
is and be respectful of
It's
that.
not that hard.
But I can still have questions
Yes,
about it once I get deeper into the understanding.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what I've experienced is people were pretty cool with questions, actually. In the cultures that I experienced when asked respectfully.
Like, yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
where I was.
Not like, yeah. I think
We
we can
all
all
know the
imagine.
we all know the
Yeah.
questions
Or
that
I'm not just gonna ask a random stranger on the street, why are you wearing a headscarf? Like
aren't you
that's,
hot?
yeah, aren't you hot? Like, does that feel oppressive to you? No, no.
No.
I'm like, when I'm asking those questions or just how they feel about certain things, like I remember um in one, we traveled around Kenya a bit. I've had great study abroad programs. If
That's
anyone wants
me.
some info about study abroad programs, like
Do it. Just do
just
it.
ask, because it's great. There's so many good programs out there. But this one, we got to travel so much and get in different little subcultures within that culture. It was great. And one that I got to spend some time with a woman who was sort of like a tutor in Swahili and some and kind of traditional Swahili culture and things like that. And so I got to spend some time with her in her home for a little while. And um, in in that area, it's accepted for there to be men with multiple wives. Not everybody does that. That's financially challenging potentially for a lot of men. But in that, I was in a very kind of traditional part of Kenya called Lamu. It's an island. It's very traditional Swahili culture. But I was developing enough of a relationship with this woman that I got to ask her, like, so just you and your husband, right, and your little son. I think they had an, yeah, and I asked her, I was like, what about polygamy? Like, what about multiple wives? Like, what do you think about that? And she shared her perspective that there's reasons for it, and she would accept you know whatever her husband chose and all these things like that. And I asked her, how would you feel about that? It's a sensitive question, and
It
she was,
is.
yeah, and I so appreciate her willingness to field that question, because she just got kind of quiet
Mm-hmm.
and she said, I wouldn't want that. and we didn't talk about it much, but we just sat and I think I just said, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So she had that tension of there's all sorts of reasons culturally and religiously, why that's acceptable and can even be considered like a really noble thing to do, to take on a second wife to save her from being a widow or save her from, economic failure or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of great reasons and that people might share, but when asking her, how do you feel about this? That's different.
It is
That's different.
different. Well, and the
So,
fact that you built a relationship
mm-hmm.
before asking this,
Yeah.
and then were respectful when you realized that she was kind of done talking
Yes.
about it, like, and not trying to press her
oh
for
my
more
goodness.
information,
Yeah.
like knowing, being able to read those types of situations to be like, okay, now I need to take a step back because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
not here for that.
Yeah. And that wasn't, we carried on spending time together after that as well. It was there was a relationship there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It wasn't just, kind of poking
Yeah.
and
Prodding for
prodding. So I appreciate that some of these travels I've experienced, I've gotten to have like actually immersive experiences where I can actually connect with people and they're actually open to me. And they'll ask me super personal questions too. I think that's why I felt comfortable asking others pretty personal questions, because I got to ask some crazy questions. And that's totally great. I was happy to share about my culture and faith and what's it like to be American. A lot of people
Yeah.
had questions about that. Um, so
Moving forward.
moving forward. So I'm gonna try to
Really quickly,
yeah.
how old were you
When I was in Kenya,
when you were in Kenya?
20.
20. Okay,
Yeah,
20.
right. I got back and I turned 21.
Okay.
Like a couple months, like a month after I got back. Yeah.
All right.
So I was there September to through December, August through December. Yeah, the fall of 2007.
Okay.
Fast forward, I graduate college. Let's just jump ahead.
Let's just jump ahead.
There's so much we could like dig into, but um I felt, I don't know if you can tell, but I was super into international travel.
I couldn't tell.
So I really wanted to make sure that I continued that after college. And I even was interested in international studies. I was interested in getting involved in international NGOs and humanitarian aid and things like that. I didn't know a lot about it then. I was just aware that there's ways to work internationally and be a helper, kind of help in different challenging circumstances. I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do that, but after I think once I was graduating from college, I ended up applying to the Peace Corps.
Okay.
Yeah, and while waiting to be sent out with the Peace Corps, because there was like a big wait time, it was during the recession. It was in 2009.
Okay,
Yeah,
2008,
2009.
2009, yeah.
So it's kind of funny. Like they had less funding, so they had to collapse down some of their programming, but they had significantly more applications because everyone's like, at least give me, I can volunteer as long as you cover my costs and everything. Like,
Yeah,
people were just trying to find things to do. But so while I was, it's a little more complicated than this, but in between graduating and going out with the Peace Corps, I was working at a psychiatric hospital in Maine, where my parents lived at the time, and that was a huge eye opener for me of just connecting with people of like in that kind of cultural diversity anyway, or diversity of mindset and emotional and mental perspective and stability and all these things. And so I learned a lot about um, mental and emotional health. Um, Started to see how, yes, I was considered healthy, very healthy emotionally and mentally, but I was like, there's not that much that separates me as a employee of this place versus a patient. I have healthy, supportive family. I've got really good coping skills. got good nutrition, like
Yeah.
it's not that much that separates me. It's a lot of good fortune. Um, so that was a really good eye-opening experience, and that has played into kind of the direction that my life took um, later on. But with the Peace Corps, I ended up going to Romania, and I taught English for a couple of years, and I lived in this tiny village in the Carpathian Mountains. Now, their religion in that area that I was in is Christian, like very, it's an Orthodox kind of,
Devout Christian.
yes, and it is, yeah, very steeped in tradition and beautiful monasteries and um, just so much. There's so much like texture to their religion. It makes me think of Catholicism in a way, like lots of incense, beautiful, um, yeah, beautiful artwork and icons and all these things. Yeah, really, really gorgeous. And really lovely people there that I experienced, especially in my little village. Oh gosh. So that's a whole other portal I could get into. But so all this is happening, and I'm continuing to expand in my spirituality. Still rooted in Christianity, but expanding. And after Romania, I decided to do a master's degree in London. I wanted to stay in Europe. Um, and I had a good friend in London. And I was really inspired to find a program there. I ended up choosing one called War and Psychiatry, which is a whole thing.
Yeah, it sounds
So
like
that's,
it.
yeah, and to keep that really brief, basically how violent conflict impacts soldiers as well as civilians
Mm-hmm.
and communities. And I focused more on the civilians and communities side, and I had colleagues who focused more on the soldiers and veterans side. So we got to kind of choose our path in that program. That was really cool. In London, I went to this fantastic church. I had a lot of Christian friends. I had a lot of like friends of all different perspectives and backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
very international kind of communities that I was part of as a student and attending a church, and I was doing like internships and things like that. It was a really rich time for me. I was only there for a year and a half, but it feels like it was like 10 years. It was like so wonderful there. I love London. Um, and yeah, I was again, okay, coming back to those Christian perspectives, still with my expansive, maybe more expansive view,
Mm-hmm.
still not into the exclusionary approach of Christianity, but still quite rooted in a lot of those um, perspectives and traditions and worldviews. From there, I ended up for a little over 5 years working for two different Christian humanitarian aid agencies in two different conflict zones. Now, this is not missionary. I was never interested in becoming a missionary. So I always have to clarify, these were faith-based organizations that were providing emergency life-saving support to communities impacted by violent conflict. So this is where my degree came in
Okay,
handily.
yes.
So um, after London, I went with a British organization to the Democratic Republic of Congo for 2.5 years. And I was working for them doing grant writing, basically, writing proposals and reporting to get more funding for the projects that we were doing on the ground. A lot of water and sanitation and food needs and all sorts of really basic life saving stuff. Um, it was a Christian organization, so there were pretty much everyone in it. Local people who were part of the organization, like local people in Congo, didn't have to be Christian to be part of it, but all of the international people who were part of it were Christian. So it was like we weren't evangelizing. That was not part of our mission. Um, but there was a lot of interesting different perspectives within that. I think how to sum that up.
Just so